So it's our privilege to turn now to Amir Tibon, who has graciously agreed to share his personal story with us. Amir, thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. My home has been destroyed on Saturday. Saturday, October 7, is the worst day in the history of the State of Israel. It's worse than the first day of the Yom Kippur War. It's worse than anything we knew during the Second Intifada. We lost on one day more than 700 people. This is almost, it's more than half of the casualties in the 5 years of the Second Intifada. It's more casualties than the first week of the 1973 war. I live in Kibbutz Nahal Oz, a beautiful community that is located directly on the border with Gaza. My wife and I moved there in 2014, immediately after the previous Gaza war, which looks like a small affair compared to what we are going through right now. But at the time, in 2014, the Nahal Oz and other communities along the border were dealing with a big crisis. If you recall, the 2014 war is when Hamas unleashed the weapon of tunnels that were dug into Israel. There was a history to these tunnels. Actually, they were already in use in the early years of the 2000s, but in 2014, Hamas used them in a massive way during the war to kill and abduct the bodies of Israeli soldiers. This rattled communities all over the world, all over the border, but as Rabbi Vorgan said, the communities are resilient. These are tough people. And yet there was a desire to bring more young families and couples to places like Nahal Oz and to create a sense of renewal and growth. And the two of us, as a young couple living in Tel Aviv at the time, decided to do it. 1 month after that war was over, we came to look for an apartment in Nahal Oz. People thought we were crazy. But we found out a beautiful and loving and hugging community, and we fell in love with the place. In 2016, we got married in Nahal Oz at the pool of the kibbutz, a small Israeli wedding with 400 guests, officiated by Rabbi Meir Azari, the Reform movement in Israel, a dear friend and a leader, something we are missing in this country these days. We don't have leaders in Israel today. But Rabbi Azari, as a movement leader, is someone I appreciate deeply. We later lived for 3 years in the United States. I was sent by Haaretz, my newspaper, to be the Washington correspondent. And in 2020, we returned to Nahal Oz. By now, we were parents. We were raising 2 small daughters in this kibbutz. We love the life in Nahal Oz. Anyone who has visited, and I see some people here in the audience who had visited me and my family in Nahal Oz over the years, including Rabbi Jacobs. And I have very fond memories of the last time that he came over. But it's a beautiful place. It's serene, it's green, open spaces, and the community is the most important part of it. My girls love the life of the kibbutz. They love their kindergarten. They love going to see the cows and going to the pool in the summer. And over the years, we also dealt with difficult situations. There were mortar attacks and rocket attacks. There is no Iron Dome in Nahal Oz. It's too close to the border. There was the whole phenomenon of the incendiary balloons and other elements that were used by Hamas to start fires in our fields. And yet these threats were not enough to change our mind about living in Nahal Oz. Last year, we bought a home in the kibbutz. And in that new and beautiful home, we were sleeping on Saturday morning, when at 6 a.m., my wife, Miri, woke me up and said that there is a whistle. A whistle is what you hear when a mortar is in the air and it's about to land. And I heard it. We ran to what we call the safe room. In every house in the border communities, there is a room that is built of massive concrete that is supposed to withstand direct hits by mortars or rockets. Most families, like we did, turn that room into the children's room so that they can sleep safely if there is an attack. We ran to the safe room and we heard explosions. And I have to say, we were not excited at all. We are used to this. This is something that happens from time to time, and we have a procedure for it. While we are locking ourselves in the safe room, we pack 2 bags with clothes and everything for ourselves and the girls, and we wait for the moment when there is a brief stop. We shove them into the car, and we go to somewhere else safer. And so we were in the safe room. Galia, our 3.5-year-old, was sleeping. Carmel, our 1.5-year-old, was sleeping. We were packing, and we were waiting. And then something different happened, something that was chilling. We started to hear gunfire. At first, it was a bit distant in the fields outside the kibbutz, which border directly on Gaza. But then it got closer and closer. We could hear now it was from the road into the kibbutz. Now it was from the neighborhood. And then it was outside our window. The gunfire was directly outside our window. And then it was inside the house. They were shooting rounds of ammunition into our home. We did not know if the terrorists were inside the house or just right next to it. We were locked with the girls inside. The electricity fell down. We were checking our phone, and we saw that all of our neighbors in the kibbutz are experiencing the same thing. They were hearing gunfire outside their windows. They were hearing shouts in Arabic. I listened, and I understand Arabic. I understood what they were saying. It was tactical discussions, where to go, what to do. And we realized that we were alone. When we moved to Nahal Oz, as I said, the biggest fear was the tunnels. The successive Israeli governments, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, invested billions of dollars, I believe some of it also involved U.S. aid, in constructing an underground wall that goes deep, deep, deep into the ground in an attempt to solve this threat of the tunnels so that we could sleep at night. Because I can tell you, we can sleep at night knowing that a mortar could fall on our house, and we can sleep at night knowing that there could be a fire outside our home. But people would not be able to put their kids to sleep at night if they had known that the tunnel threat, which is basically the threat of an infiltration of terrorists into the community, was still alive. And so, as I said, billions of dollars into constructing this underground wall. And in 5 minutes, Hamas brought tractors and SUVs and ran over the border fence. Anyone who knows a bit Israeli military history will immediately think about what we call the Bar-Lev line, which was a line of military fortifications built in Sinai, across from the Suez Canal, that was supposed to create a buffer from the Egyptian military, and that was just run over by the Egyptians as the starting move of the 1973 war. And when we are in the safe room, hearing the gunfire, I thought, this is it. The underground wall is the Bar-Lev line, and we are now on the first day of the Yom Kippur War. The safe room is supposed to be locked from inside. And I can tell you that in many, many homes in our kibbutz, lives were saved because of this. Because in our home, the terrorists never entered. Our home was locked, all the windows were shut, all the curtains were down. They shot a lot of bullets into the house, but they did not manage to enter. In other homes, they managed to enter, and people were locked in the safe room, and the terrorists tried to open the door, shoot at the door, but they could not enter. However, unfortunately, in other homes, I don't know how and why, they were able to kill, injure, and kidnap members of our community. We were barricaded inside. I made 2 phone calls as long as we had cell reception, because at some point cell reception was lost. I made 1 phone call to my friends at Haaretz, Amos Har'el and Yaniv Kubovich, the military correspondents. I told them what was happening, and I asked them to talk to anyone they can in the military to send the Air Force. I realized it would take a lot of time to bring ground forces. I asked them to send the Air Force to bomb the neighborhood from the air. And I called my father. My father, Amir Tibon, is a retired military general. He's a friend of the reform movement, if I can say, all of our family. He was in Tel Aviv, and I told him, the terrorists are here. They're outside our door. And he said 2 words. He said, I'm coming. When all of this was happening, my wife and I were asking something incredible and unbelievable from our two young daughters. We were asking them to listen to us and to believe us, that they cannot talk right now, that they have to be absolutely quiet and silent. No talking, no crying. They asked if they can go outside to play in the living room. We said no. They asked if they can go eat in the kitchen. We said no. They asked to go to the bathroom. We said no. And they had to put their faith in us, that we were not just insisting with them like parents sometimes do, but that there was a real reason for this. And they put their faith in us. My girls were the heroes of this day. For 10 hours, they were silent in a dark room where they cannot even see their parents, and they did not cry, and they did not shout, and they listened to what we said. And I told myself in my heart, if I'm asking my girls now to put their faith in me and to go against the very nature of being a 1.5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old child, I must put my faith in my father the same way. And if he said that he will come from Tel Aviv, which is an hour and 15, 20-minute drive, I need to believe he will do it. I don't know how he will get here, but I need to believe, just like my girls are now believing me that they need to be quiet, I need to believe my father will come. For long hours, we heard the fighting. Soldiers, brave soldiers, tried to engage the terrorists. They were outmaneuvered. They were surprised. Our neighbors were riding in the group as long as there was cell reception. The terrorists were in their house trying to break in. My colleagues Amos and Yaniv, who courageously tried to help, told me that I need to understand the severity of the situation. Nahal Oz was one of many scenes of chaos that morning. The Hamas surprised us in a strategic way. They broke into military bases. They broke into Sderot and Ofakim and many kibbutzim along the border. They arrived at the scene of a music festival and slaughtered more than 200 people just there. The worst terror attack in the history of the state of Israel. The magnitude of the failure is impossible to comprehend. And I have to say, after this war will be over and Israel will win, each and every one of the people responsible for this failure, starting with the corrupt Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, will be thrown into the dustbin of history. But this is for tomorrow. Now we are fighting. I understood the severity of the situation, that we are alone. And I prepared to die. I did not think we could be rescued, but the one hope I had was maybe somehow my father at some point will arrive. My parents started driving from Tel Aviv. I learned only many, many hours later what happened to them on this dark day. At first, they arrived in the area of Sderot, and they saw people running barefoot away from the scene of the music festival. They took them in their car toward the safe place outside of the line of fire. They arrived at a nearby community, Kibbutz Nahal Oz. My father teamed there with one brave soldier who agreed to come with him to Nahal Oz and try to fight the terrorists in our neighborhood who were entering houses and trying to kill people. The two of them drove toward Nahal Oz. My father had only a pistol. He's retired. He's over 60. And while they are driving, they see ahead of them an Israeli military jeep being ambushed by a Hamas cell and fighting. They stopped the car. They joined the brave soldiers of the Maglan Special Forces unit, and they killed the terrorists. Some soldiers were killed in that ambush. Others were wounded. And my father, now very close to the entrance to Nahal Oz, minutes away, took the wounded soldiers in his jeep and turned around and went back to where my mother was waiting to bring her the wounded soldiers so that their lives could be saved. And then my parents decided to split. My mom took the wounded soldiers in her car, two of them, to a hospital. And my father saw another retired general, Israel Ziv, who is older than my father even. I think he's closer to 70. But he woke up that morning, he put on uniform, and he went down south to try to save people. And my father told him, Israel, I need help. I don't have a car. My wife took the wounded soldiers in my car to the hospital. Please take me to Nahal Oz. I need to go and save my family. I need to go and save other people in that kibbutz. And Israel Ziv, in an act of extreme selflessness, decided to risk his life and drive my father to Nahal Oz on the same road where there was an ambush before, in a regular car. They made it. And in the entrance to the kibbutz, my father saw a group of soldiers from the special forces. They recognized him. They knew he was a former general. He had a gun by now. One of the wounded heroes gave him his gun and his helmet. And they started to go from home to home in the kibbutz to engage the terrorists and to free the people who were sitting in the safe rooms for now. It was 7, 8, 9 hours. We had no idea this was happening. At this point, we had no cell phone reception anymore. We're just sitting in the dark and waiting. And we started to hear the intense gunfire and the exchange of fire from different kinds of weapons. You could hear the noises. And that's when I told Miri, my brave wife, that my father is coming. He's in the kibbutz now. They were going from house to house with this incredibly courageous group of Maglan soldiers. They killed 6 terrorists at least. They freed people from the kibbutz. Some people were sending me text messages that my father is there, but I could not see it because we had no phone at this point. The last hour in the safe room was the most difficult. The girls had fallen asleep and then they woke up. And by then it was very dark. The little tiny bit of light that had come in through a crack in one of the walls was no longer there. And the girls, they had not ate anything since last night. We only had water with us. And they really wanted to get out. And the only thing I could tell them that kept them behaving and quiet was Saba Baderech, grandfather is coming. They listened and we waited and we heard the gunfire and we prayed for all our neighbors. And at 4 p.m. after 10 hours, we heard a large bang on the window of the safe room. And we heard my father's voice, and Galia, my 3.5-year-old, said, Saba Egia, grandfather is here. This is when we cried for the first time. Our home became the temporary headquarters, if you want to call it, of this brave group of special forces soldiers. They brought everyone there. They brought neighbors who were injured. They brought neighbors who could no longer stay in their homes because their doors were broken. They brought old people who did not want to stay alone anymore after 10 hours alone in the dark. It was a very happy moment to see everyone, to give them hugs, to realize he is alive, she's alive. But it was also a terrible moment because we started hearing about the people who are not alive, those who were killed, those who were missing, those who were injured, those who were kidnapped. In the middle of the night, a bus arrived and took us away towards safety. And now we are in Tel Aviv with my family, and most of the kibbutz is in Kibbutz Mishmar HaEmek in the valley, in the Jezreel Valley, who is hosting us. I am in total admiration of the heroes who saved us, of my father and my mother who saved so many people, of my daughters. And I have to say at the same time, I am in complete shock over what happened to our country and to our community. The most important issue right now is the people who are kidnapped in Gaza. There has to be an absolute international demand, not for Hamas to be responsible for their fate or diplomatic jargon of this kind that I know as a diplomatic reporter. The demand has to be their immediate release. These are civilians, these are citizens, there are many women there, children, elderly people, Holocaust survivors. This is incredibly important. I spoke today before a group of ambassadors from the UN Human Rights Council, and I told them, please, your governments should not say Hamas is held responsible. Your governments should say, release these people now. And I want to commend one of the only leaders in Israeli politics today, Mansour Abbas, the leader of the United Arab List Party, who put out a statement in Arabic and in Hebrew this evening, saying that holding women and children captive and sick and elderly people captive is against the laws of Islam and that Hamas must release them immediately. This is the most important issue. We have to win this war, and it will take a terrible toll from the people of Gaza. I want to prepare everyone for this, because this will not be easy. But the toll that the people of Gaza will pay for the crimes of Hamas will be heartbreaking and unavoidable at the same time. No country in the world can accept a situation in which 700 people are slaughtered in one day, more than 100 are kidnapped. This is a different situation than anything we've experienced before. And if Hamas is not destroyed at the end of this war, an entire region in Israel will not be inhabited again. People will not put their kids to sleep in the safe rooms again if they don't know that the equation has changed and that this threat has not been minimized or hurt. The threat must be eliminated for our communities to return home and to put our kids to bed in those rooms again. There will also be a very, very difficult day after of rebuilding and renewing the communities. And here the American Jewish community will have a massive role. For many years, the American Jewish community put too much resources and energy in the wrong places, supporting the people in Israel who disrespect American Jews, the people in Israel who are responsible for this tragedy, let's be honest. Now there will be an opportunity to support these communities on the border and rebuild them from this disaster. And as I said earlier, we will also have to get rid of the people responsible for this tragedy, the corrupt and dysfunctional government that is leading us, in brackets. But that is the conversation of tomorrow. Today, we need to win the war. We need the world to support us, especially on the issue of the kidnapped people, and we need to plan how to rebuild our home and community so that one day we can again put our daughters to sleep in the room in Nahal Oz and know that they are safe. Thank you for listening.